What's going on, friends? Welcome to Forward Progress, the Friday edition where we are going to be doing props, fantasy, injury discussions, all for this week's games. As a reminder, we're going live every Monday to Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern with an assortment of hosts and guests to talk about the football slate coming up this week, Sunday mornings as well. Rob Pizzola will be live doing the pizza buffet where at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern, he's going to go through the entire Sunday board and place his bets before the game. So if you're looking for something to sweat and you don't have anything before the game, that is the best place to go. And then finally, in the evening on Sunday, right before the Sunday night football game, Rob and Clive Bigsby will be live discussing opening lines from Pinnacle and where they see them moving in the week. If you're looking to get CLV, you're looking to bet early, that's the best place to be. So much good content on this channel. You should hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you do not miss any of the content that we are putting out. Also, for today, smash that like button, gives us a boost in the algorithm, and it also lets Rob know that I'm doing a good job. Usually, you'll see George Tsilfidis here, but today I'm filling in for him. George is busy today. Hopefully, I do a good job filling in. Let me know if I don't, though, in the comments down below. And of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsors over at Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sportsbook and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. 25 years of competitive odds, your trusted sportsbook. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly and not available in the US. With that out of the way, guys, I'm going to bring on our first guest today. We have Matthew Freedman coming on, Plus EV Sports Bettor from The Fantasy Life. Matthew, how's it going? How was your Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, Thursday could have been better. Not gonna lie. I feel like I didn't have the best read on that game. I thought it was going to be closer than it was. I had the Giants plus 10.5, and that macro perspective impacted the way in which I positioned myself in the prop market. So, 1-3. Honestly, glad I was 1-3. It could have been 0-4. So, survive and move on to the weekend slate.
Exactly. And sometimes those games are really hard to read. I know personally, I was kind of back and forth on that 10.5, and I'd really just stayed off it because I wasn't really sure. And I mean, there were so many injuries last night for the Giants. Let's quickly talk a bit about them. We had Ben Bredeson out for them, Andrew Thomas, Saquon Barkley, Azeez Ojulari, tons of guys missing time here for the Giants. But I think the biggest thing to come out of last night for me personally was the Giants' willingness to kind of just roll over and die, right? I understand there was I think there was 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. They made that stop. San Fran punted the ball, and then they trotted out Tyrod Taylor. I get it. You're down 3 scores. You probably don't. You'd have like literally no chance in the game, like maybe a 0.01% chance. But I mean, you just gave Daniel Jones 4 years, a 4-year deal with $160 million. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
They're not a good team. Like that's just the most basic, superficial type of explanation. But like right now, they are not a good team. They can't get out of that contract with Jones. I think it's going to be a painful season. I took the alt under a 5.5 on them in the off season. I mean, they have a really tough schedule. The thing is, like, in theory, they could have even improved as a team this year and still had a tough season just based on how a lot of things lined up for them and, natural regression. I do think that Dable is probably a good coach, but they feel like the kind of team that is just going to get obliterated by your sort of like upper third, upper quartile type of teams. So we saw that in week 1, hammered by the Cowboys. We saw it this Thursday night, barely escaped with a win against the Cardinals, who, might be one of the bottom 5 teams in the league. Just nothing really positive to say about the Giants.
Yeah, and Sharp Clark, who is a contributor on this channel, put out a great tweet today just talking about how Daniel Jones and Brian Dable kind of get beaten up by these really high-end defenses here. You should go check out his Twitter at Sharp Clark NFL if you're looking for those numbers. But yeah, this Giants team likes to beat up on smaller teams, but when they go to the big boys, they tend to get their lunch money taken from them. I mean, like, at this point, do you think that, like, it's tough to get out of this Daniel Jones contract, but like, should they be looking to rebuild and like kind of build this whole team from the ground up and like kind of tear everything down? I think that's part of the problem with Brian Daboll as well, is he's actually such a like pretty good coach that he can like mask these weaknesses in like fundamental team building, where I feel like the Giants are lacking.
I don't even know what a rebuild would look like for the Giants, because I mean, I feel like they have a coach. They're kind of locked in with their quarterback. They need to address the wide receiver position. They need to figure something out there because like what they're doing now is not satisfactory.
Yeah, it sucks. And I would really wish they would mix in Jalen Hyatt a little bit more because he was at least creating some separation off of his corners last night in like the 5 snaps that he played. Let's go over to the other side though. More fun to talk about the Niners than the Giants. Last night we saw CMC finally get a little bit of a reduced workload. Mind you, he still had 18 carries and I believe he had 5 or 6 catches on 6 or 7 targets. We saw Elijah Mitchell work in though, right? Elijah Mitchell's really first, let's call it full game of the season. He had 11 carries to CMC's 18. We talked about this yesterday on this channel. I host the Thursday show. We mentioned that, hey, maybe Elijah Mitchell might mix in with it being a shortened week. Do you think this was just a function of it being a short week where CMC kind of, I don't want to say lost work, but like had a little bit of a reduced workload and Elijah Mitchell mixed in? Or do you think that this is maybe a trend we're going to see moving forward as we get deeper into the season?
Yeah, a little bit of all of it. I misread the situation entering Thursday Night Football. I didn't really think about the short rest. That was sharp. Some of it was getting the lead early in the game. Some
Yeah,
of
for
it was
sure.
the only 4 days to prepare and rest. And then Shanahan has said that he wants to ease off of CMC a little bit. So I think we see a continuation of this. I don't think it's going to be as, emphasized as like 18 to 11 carries.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that there. And then the last thing I want to touch on is the loss of Brandon Ayuk. We don't know. He probably is coming back next week with 10 days rest. It looked like he was a 50-50 to go last night. But I mean, when a guy like that goes down, he was like, it seemed like he was the guy the first 2 weeks. But then when a guy like that goes down, you kind of forget how funneled these targets get towards Deebo Samuel and George Kittle here. Like, if Brandon Ayuk comes back and he is fully healthy, do you think it's still going to be Brandon Ayuk then the rest? Or do you think we're just going to see like a carousel of targets here for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, they have like a 4 alpha offense,
It's
like
crazy.
it's this situation where when one of those guys is out, at that point you see the opportunity for the other 3 remainders to like become the best version of themselves. But if Ayuk comes back, I think it's Ayuk number 1, but like still barely. Like
Yeah.
in any given game, like Debo can go off. And it's the same with Kittle, the same with CMC, obviously as a runner, but then also as a receiver. So, Debo, I think this was like an emphatic reminder of just how good he is in his own right. And, we saw that 2 years ago when he had like something like 1,700 yards from scrimmage. Like the guy is an unreal playmaker. Debo is probably like the better playmaker. Ayuk is probably the better receiver.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and you can see that with just how they utilized Deebo Samuel. I mean, that was a screen pass, and he just ran 40 yards. Just 4 guys couldn't tackle him, doing his best Marshawn Lynch impression over there. All right, that's enough about Thursday. Let's get into the Sunday games right now. There were 2 games you want to talk about. One of them being the New England Patriots on the road, to the New York Jets. A couple of injuries to note here. Trent Brown limited for New England. Jonathan Jones also limited, and then Marcus Jones, a DNP. On the other side of the coin, we have the Jets. Greg Zuerlein was limited at practice with a groin issue. Tony Adams limited. Michael Carter II, not the running back, the cornerback, limited as well. And then also Breece Hall limited, but we'll probably be seeing that throughout the year as he looks to recover from that injury in the offseason. Let's start with the Jets here. They look like an actual good team minus their quarterback, right? And for so many years, the quarterback has been their issue. And I know this has probably been talked to death with Aaron Rodgers being out, but they said that Zach Wilson is their guy. After last week and going into this week, do you still believe that they think that Zach Wilson is the guy?
I mean, he's the guy for right now, but like if they lose more games in terrible fashion, they'll probably bring someone in, but I doubt like it's a big trade for Cousins or Tannehill, even though I think that would make sense.
Yeah, fair enough here. I mean, if it looks like we'll be seeing Zach Wilson at least for the next, let's call it 2 to 3 games, and like how much does this feel? How much do you feel like this neuters that offense with like talents like Breece Hill, with talents like Garrett Wilson, and all the guys they brought in this offseason?
Entirely neutered. There's nothing left down there. It has all been taken away. Like I forgot who tweeted this out, but there was a graph of offensive metrics, and you have the Jets like all the way in the bottom left-hand corner. It's just like absolutely terrible what is happening with this offense.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I think that was Ben Baldwin, maybe Computer Cowboy, usually does those charts, but I'll have to look at that on Twitter later. So continuing with the Jets here, I mean, it's going to be a scary situation for them, right? Because if they don't make a move now, and if they wait, they're probably going to lose this game, right? At least they're lined to lose this game right here. The next 3 games they have are the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Eagles, right? They're probably looking at that coming out 2-4, 1-5. And I mean, at that point, do you think they can even trade for a guy? Like, if you're 1-5, 2-4 in the hole, in a tough division, in a tough conference, like, is there any hope for this team?
No, I mean, it is already right now, it is already too late.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they could have been 0-6 or 1-5 to open the year with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like it takes time to get a quarterback acclimated. So given like how hard it is to integrate a new quarterback into your system, like even if they traded right now for Kirk Cousins, they would still be significantly behind the 8 ball all the way until the week 7 bye.
Yeah, and they pulled an absolute rabbit out of the hat with that win over the Buffalo Bills. But enough about the New York Jets. Let's flip over, talk about the New England Patriots. The biggest shock for me in seeing the New England Patriots this year was how like competent their passing attack looked this year compared to last year. Are you surprised at all that it's looked like not terrible? I guess is the best way to put it.
No, I mean, Bill O'Brien is average at worst as an offensive coordinator, and Matt Patricia was terrible. He's literally not even an offensive coordinator, and that's not like an insult. That is a statement of fact. So, like, it's a massive upgrade overall. So, I don't think they're going to be all that great against this defense, but like, in general, we should see a functional offense.
Yeah, fair enough. And continuing with this offense here, you do a lot of fantasy stuff for the fantasy life. And I want to talk about Hunter Henry because he seems to be that one tight end who might have creeped his way up to be the guy behind the big 3 of Kelsey, Andrews, and Hawkinson. Do you think he's there yet? Hunter Henry being that, like, I don't want to call him upper echelon, but like the tier behind the upper echelon tier. Do you think he's there?
No.
Not yet.
But like, so I have him as the tight end 12 this week. And I gotta say, like, there's not much of a difference between the guys who are like tight end 7 and 8 and the guys who are tight end 10 through 12. Like they are like all in this clump together. But you still have, after that top 3 that you mentioned, you still have like you have Kittle in there, you have Waller, you have Goddard. Like those are like really solid guys who are still a class above like everyone else.
Yeah. They have like kind of a floor where if they don't get a touchdown, you'll be like not throwing up all over yourself when you look at the box score afterward. So last question here before we get into one of your bets on this game. So how do you think, you touched a little bit on this, but how do you think this offense, I mean, I mentioned it looked decent. How do you think they'll be able to produce against this New York Jets defense that looks to be like legit, like a top 3, top 5 defense in the league?
Yeah, I bet the under on this game. Like I think it's a back and forth type of game without a lot of scoring.
Yeah, fair enough. And the only thing I worry about betting the under with Zach Wilson in the game is how often he turns over the ball on like the 20-yard line. And it's like you get a free red zone drive. Anyways, let's continue with the New England passing offense a little bit more. You're looking at Mac Jones for one of your props this week. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I like over 31.5 pass attempts. And, I mentioned you have Bill O'Brien there. With him, the offense has really changed. They went from number 17 in pass play rate last year, number 17 in pace, to number 4 in pass play rate and number 4 in pace. And so as a result, Jones leads the league with 96 pass attempts through 2 weeks. And so the spread of this game is close. I think that means we don't see the Patriots like really lean into the running game. Like they will need to be a little more balanced throughout the contest. So again, I don't think the Patriots are going to do a lot on offense, but I think we're going to see enough opportunities for Jones to hit the over on the pass attempts. And I have this projected, or like the site rather, Fantasy Life, we have this projected for 35. So I think there's some significant wiggle room there.
Okay, so I just have a quick question for you because the board right now, there's a lot of 31.5, but there's also 32.5. And 32.5 best price right now in market is Pinnacle at the plus 114. 31.5, I'm looking right now, best price I can find is around minus 120. Yeah, minus 120. So like just philosophically speaking, like what would you rather play right now if for the pass attempts? Would you rather take the step up, go to 32.5, get that plus money, or stick with the 31.5 and get the minus 120?
I would probably rather do the 31.5. I think like the difference from like that one pass attempt is probably worth more than like the difference in the juice. But either one, I feel like I would be fine with, given that we have it at 35.
Fair enough here. Okay, I'm going to lock that in right now. 31.5 minus 120 for a full unit. All right, let's move on to our next game here. We have the Atlanta Falcons at the Detroit Lions. Detroit currently lined -3, -114. They opened up as like 4.5 point favorites, I want to say, but then all this injury news came out. We had Taylor Decker, Halopilivaitai. I cannot say his name for the life of me. David Montgomery hurt. Emmanuel Mosley hurt. Amon-Ra potentially hurt. Josh Reynolds hurt. I mean, we got a ton of injuries here for the Lions. And on the other side, Troy Anderson for Atlanta, full participant. Jeff Okudah, full participant, looking to be relatively healthy here. I mean, the Detroit Lions potentially without two offensive linemen and their 1A running back in David Montgomery. Your 1 and 2 options might also be nicked up this week with Amon-Ra and Reynolds. How concerned are you about the output of this Detroit Lions offense this week?
Slightly concerned, but not that concerned. David Montgomery, not to say like running backs don't matter, but like they have running back depth there. And then Amon-Ra, he practiced limitedly on Thursday. So I'm, cautiously optimistic he's going to play in this game and basically be, like a version of himself.
Yeah, fair enough here. And then so you mentioned the running backs here. And again, like just want to take the fantasy angle. Outside looking in, this should be like a good game for Jahmyr Gibbs. But then you had, when David Montgomery went down last week, you had Craig Reynolds step in on like the David Montgomery touches, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you think this is going to be like a Jahmyr Gibbs game, or is it just going to be Craig Reynolds just swooping up, taking that David Montgomery role? How do you see this RB room shaking out here?
Yeah, a little bit between. I think Reynolds gets like a toned down Montgomery role, and then Gibbs has a sturdier floor and a higher ceiling than he's had previously. Like his receiving work that is locked in.
Yeah.
He could inherit some of Montgomery's rushing workload, although probably not that much of it. So I have him as a fantasy like low end RB1.
Okay, I like that. And with the RB landscape, anyway, like the RB landscape has been horrible. Take anyone you can get. On the other side of the coin, we have the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm happy we're able to talk about this game because I do the Thursday show. Atlanta does not play on Thursday this year. And that kind of made me sad because I am so frustrated with this team and I want to talk about them. They are like literally watching them makes me want to rip my hair out. They feel like a fake team to me. I mean, 2 weeks ago, they beat the Carolina Panthers kind of on the back of 2 costly turnovers that led to 2 of their only three scores. What do you make of this Atlanta Falcons team here? They kind of beat the Packers because the Packers puked on themselves and lost that game. Like, what are your thoughts on this Atlanta Falcons team?
Yeah, I mean, entering the season, they had one of the easiest strength of schedules. So, like, we should expect them to kind of outperform, like, what they actually are as a team. And, like, they feel like the NFL's version of, like, a military service academy where, like, because they run the ball so much and because they play out as so many different, especially, like, heavy personnel packages, like they are different than every other team. And like that, which makes you weird, could also like make you almost wonderful, like they're hard to game plan for, which means like in every game, they always have a shot to win. But that said, like they might be maximizing like the most out of their scheme, but they are definitely not maximizing the most out of the talent that they have on the roster.
It's so frustrating watching Desmond Ridder throw to Drake London and Kyle Pitts. But I mean, I could talk about that all day. So we'll just leave that as it is. And we'll talk about the running game, like you mentioned here. It's where it's at with this team. Like you said, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. I mean, they are a 2-headed monster. You are targeting this backfield this week for one of your props. So tell us a little bit about how you see the usage in this backfield and who you like for this game for our props.
Yeah, Tyler Algier over 41.5 rushing yards. Last year, the Falcons were number 2 in run rate. This year, they're number 1. I mean, like running the ball is what they do. They're basically just a backfield factory. And even with Bijan Robinson there balling out, Algier still had 15 and 16 carries in weeks 1 and 2 for 75 and 48 yards rushing. Like going back to last season, he hasn't had fewer than 41.5 yards rushing since week 10, and he was splitting the work with Cordarrelle Patterson, So he is really important to what they do. And Patterson was inactive last week. So as long as Algier doesn't have competition from both Bijan and Patterson, I think he has a really good chance to hit the over here. And of course, like the matchup against the run defense for the Lions, that's just kind of icing on the cake.
Fair enough here. And you're about to head out. Before you do, you have 3 more best bets. So why don't you hit us with them in rapid succession here?
Yeah, Brian Robinson under 17 and a half carries, just negative game state going against a pretty good Bills defense. I just don't think he's going to have the opportunities really to hit the over there. Trevor Lawrence over 14 and a half rushing yards. He's hit the over in both of the past two games. And I've talked previously about how I think just for pocket passers who have mobility in general, the market this year has been too low on their rushing props. And then finally, Alexander Madison under 58 and a half yards rushing. I mean, he's playing for the pass heaviest team in the league. He's been incredibly inefficient. And now, maybe Cam Akers comes in to steal a couple of carries, and maybe they give a little more work to Ty Chandler. So taking the under there, 58 and a half.
All right, I like those plays. And Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. You can catch all Matthew's work over at thefantasylife.com. So go check it out there. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Have a great one.
All right, see ya. All right, that was Matthew Freedman from thefantasylife.com plus EV Better. Now, moving on to our next guest, we have Jack Miller, NFL fan who does NFL fantasy betting and projections for Establish the Run here. Jack Miller, how's it going, man?
Going well. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here with you. I'm usually on the back end here, so it's very nice to come here and talk to you face to face in person. First game we have on the docket here, though, we have the LA Rams going head against the Cincinnati Bengals, and this game has been like completely all over the place throughout the week. I'm happy that you brought it up as one of the games you wanted to talk about here. I mean, the line movement, I can't keep track of it on my sheet. I have it as Bengals -3.5 right now, but that's moved since I wrote it down. We saw the Rams open up 6.5 point dogs, moved all the way down to 1.5, back up to 3.5 today. And then now it looks like it's going back down to that 1.5 again. I mean, the injuries we're keeping note on is the Joe Noteboom here for the Rams. And then obviously for the Bengals, Joe Burrow, right? That's the biggest story here. So, I mean, with this line movement, what do you make of this Bengals offense with or without Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I think the opening number at 6.5 was just bad, given how, there's a chance Burrow doesn't play. And then even if he does play, the Bengals offense hasn't been very good. I did see that he was throwing during individual drills at practice today. We'll see if we get any more reports. I was not super concerned with the Bengals offense after week 1, but after seeing them repeat it in week 2, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned. It seems like the calf is a real issue for Burrow. With that being said, I typically am not betting into major markets later in the week, so I'm not like taking a side on the Bengals Rams game. But I am curious to see where it closes with or without Burrow.
Yeah, that's a good question. And just out of curiosity, have you looked in at all on backup quarterback? I believe Jake Browning. Is it do you know anything about him? Because I haven't seen a drop on him.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, once line there's not even props out for this game yet, which makes a ton of sense because obviously they need to know if Burrow's playing first. I think if he gets ruled out, that's when I'll really dig in. But obviously, even with Burrow at kind of half ability right now, I'd imagine Jake Browning is a pretty enormous downgrade for the Bengals.
Fair enough. Downgrade for the Bengals. But how do you feel like it's a downgrade for those skill position receivers in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? I mean, Jamar Chase has been really slow to start the year, uncharacteristic of him. First game, we can kind of give him the pass for that weird weather week. But the second game, it felt like he just couldn't. I don't know if he wasn't getting separation or if Joe Burrow felt like he had to get the ball off quickly because of his calf. I feel like he couldn't move around in the pocket, step up and get a throw out to Jamar Chase here. But I mean, T. Higgins saw it all. Like, how do you feel those two guys kind of stack up with or without Joe Burrow going into this game?
Yeah, I think it's more an indictment on Burrow than it is on any of the receivers, especially knowing that Burrow's been dealing with this calf injury. I don't really think there's anything wrong with Jamar or with T. Higgins. So I think the volume is going to be there regardless for both guys. It's just a question of if Burrow can play, and if he does play, if he can actually be effective.
Okay, fair enough here. And enough about this Bengals team, because again, too much in the air here to kind of know what to do from a props angle perspective. Let's talk about the Rams, who are like almost like the storybook. I don't want to say ending, but like a good story in this season. Let's call it that. I mean, to start, first of all, Puka Nacua has been fantastic for this team. He's looking to go against Bijan Robinson here for Rookie of the Year, maybe, who knows, but he's kind of proven himself over the past 2 weeks that he's not a flash in the pan. But when Cooper Kupp does come back, if he does, How do you think that eats into Puka's targets? And do you think that will eat into his targets or more so Tutu Atwell's targets? Like how do you think this shakes out when or if Cooper Kupp comes back?
Yeah, I think it's a downgrade for everyone, but I do think Puka Nacua is gonna be a pretty big part of this offense regardless. He can play inside, he can play outside. I don't think you get 25 catches in 2 games and then just all of a sudden when Cooper Kupp comes back, you go away. And Kupp is 30 years old now. He has an extensive injury history beyond this year, and then the hamstring thing is just kind of really weird with him seeing a specialist and no one really knowing what's going on. So I think Puka's here to stay when Kupp comes back, if Kupp comes back, but assuming he does come back, it's a downgrade, I think, across the board for Puka, for Tutu, for Higbee, for Van Jefferson, for all these guys. But I mean, I think Puka is still going to be a pretty big part of this offense. Like from a fantasy perspective, I think Puka is going to be pretty relevant all year long.
Yeah, and he's relevant because his quarterback has done wonders this year. I mean, I'm kicking myself for looking down on Matthew Stafford and this Rams team and this offense and just being down on them in general coming into this year, just assuming that they were tanking. But I mean, McVay and Stafford, they're two of the best at what they do, and they were able to string together some great games. Are you impressed with Stafford's performance so far over these last 2 weeks? We had Sharp Clark come on here and say, like, out of principle, Matthew Stafford, in his opinion, has been the best quarterback to play so far in the 2023 season. What are your thoughts on Matthew Stafford's season so far?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument for that. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa probably is the MVP front runner if the season ended today. But I mean, if you consider the weapons that Stafford has compared to Tua, I think that it's fair to say he's been the most impressive quarterback, especially relative to expectations and how down everyone was on the Rams this year.
Fair enough. And the last thing here on the Rams, I want to talk Cam Akers, who was just kind of dumped for nothing, essentially, basically cut, but they got maybe a 6th-round pick for him in a pick swap. Who knows if that's going to come through, what the conditions are. I haven't really looked into it too much yet, but that means it's full go for Kyren Williams here. I looked at their RB room. I think they have Ronnie Rivers as their backup. Is it full go for Kyren Williams here?
I think so, at least in the short term. Well, I mean, he's a former day 3 pick with 1 career start, so we'll see in December if he's still a workhorse. But I think in the short term, I mean, his role last week was absolutely ridiculous. He was running around on basically every Matt Stafford dropback. He was out there for pretty much every snap. I forget the exact number, but like 90-something% of snaps. His role right now is second to maybe only Christian McCaffrey in the NFL right now. So yeah, I think week 3, week 4, like the immediate future, Kyren Williams is a complete workhorse for the Rams.
Yeah, and he does a lot in pass protection as well, which is probably how he won the heart of Sean McVay here. But enough about this game. Let's move on to the next game that we're going to discuss here. We're talking the Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland -3, -115 right now at home. Not too many major injuries to monitor through practice for the Browns, but obviously that major injury to Nick Chubb was a devastating loss for the team and a devastating loss to fans who just enjoy watching good football. Nick Chubb is one of the best pure runners in the NFL right now, and to see him suffer such a horrific injury, it's terrible and it hurts me personally. But I mean, it's the nature of the NFL. When one guy goes down, we have to look forward and move on. And who's next up? The Browns bring in Kareem Hunt. They have Jerome Ford in their backfield. They also have Pierre Strong, who kind of looks to be playing more so of a special teams role. How do you see this backfield shaking out? Is it just going to be a 3-headed mess? Do you think one guy could come out ahead of the other? What are your thoughts?
I think it's going to be Jerome Ford's backfield, and then Hunt is going to be mixing in behind him as like a complimentary back. Maybe in week 3 we see Ford in the like a Nick Chubb type role, obviously way less talented, and then Kareem Hunt filling in the role Ford was in before. Stefanski said this week a couple of times that he's going to be featured back, lead back, used both terms. So I expect it to be Jerome Ford's backfield moving forward.
All right, so I shouldn't be kicking myself for dropping all my fab on Jerome Ford then as a former Chubb owner. Let's talk about the Browns offense as a whole, because obviously losing Nick Chubb is a big loss. But, I mean, they really struggled against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday night. Deshaun Watson doesn't look like the Houston version of Deshaun Watson. His throws under pressure aren't there. His accuracy is not really there. Not saying that he was always good at that stuff, but it just seems to be a little bit worse than I remember. Are you concerned at all about Deshaun Watson, especially this game when he's going up against Tennessee Titans, who have a really good front seven here?
I am concerned about Watson. I was pretty high on him going into the year because I thought he had a super wide range of outcomes, and you know, for fantasy, and there's some ways to attack that in props as well. Capture that high upside, but it looks like we're going to get the left side of the distribution of the wide range of outcomes. So this is like a pass funnel defense. It's really hard to run on the Titans. It's a little more friendly to pass on them. So this might be a good get right spot for Watson, despite the good front seven. But I mean, it's just been a pretty brutal 2 weeks for him.
Yeah, and you talked about his throwing there and his receivers. He has Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore there in the passing game. Last week, it looked like Amari Cooper was going to be out, trending towards a game time decision, and then all of a sudden, bang, he's playing. I don't know if you caught the game. Did he look hurt to you at all? He mustered up 7 catches for 90 yards, so I can't imagine he was too hurt, but he's probably playing through something. How much does his playing time affect Elijah Moore here?
He looked pretty good to me. I mean, he was out there a bunch. More than I expected, to be honest. I thought he'd be more limited than he was, considering it looked like he wasn't even going to play. I mean, Elijah Moore, I think, is going to play a bunch regardless. It's just a question of target competition, and Amari. If Amari's out or limited, Elijah Moore could be the receiver 1. But with Amari in and playing like he did last week, he's the wide receiver 2, takes on a little bit of a smaller role. But I definitely think there's enough room for both Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore to be pretty productive in this offense.
Okay, fair enough here. And now let's flip over to the other side of the ball. We got the Tennessee Titans, who pulled off a massive victory out of kind of their behind last week in overtime against the Chargers. How much credit are you giving to the Titans for this victory? Or was this game more so just the Chargers charging?
I mean, it's a combination of both. It seems like the Titans always, regardless of how their roster looks on paper, it seems like Mike Vrabel just finds a way to get them to a pretty respectable season. So I think the Titans are never going to be a pushover win all year long, and behind Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears as well. They obviously were able to pull it out last week.
Yeah, fair enough. And again, kind of similar, looking at that front seven of the Browns here, they are, of course, one of the best defenses in the league. They looked really strong against the Steelers on Monday. How do you see Derrick Henry faring against this tough front seven for the Browns?
I think Henry's going to be fine. I mean, he's only averaging 3.6 yards per carry. He's getting up there in age a little bit, but they're still feeding him the rock. Tyjae Spears is playing some on passing downs, but Henry still had 25 carries. The Spears is 8 last week. So I think they're going to keep feeding him. That's kind of their MO, regardless of the opponent. So, and the Browns have a good pass defense too. So it's not like they're going to just have Tannehill come out there slinging. So I think they're going to keep leaning on Henry.
Fair enough here. And you mentioned Tyjae Spears kind of eating into that passing game work and eating into the snap share of Derrick Henry. With the age of Derrick Henry, I believe he's 28 now, and the fragility of the running back position. Can you see this trend kind of moving forward here where Tyjae Spears, as the season goes on, eats more and more into that Henry workload?
I can see it if he plays well. I think for now, Spears is in kind of the Dontrell Hilliard maybe plus role where he's taking all the passing downs. Maybe the Titans realize that with Henry being almost 30 years old and having so many career touches, that if Tyjae is deserving of more touches, that they take off touches from Henry whenever it makes sense. But Henry still did have 25 carries and 3 catches last week. So they haven't been shy about getting him the ball through 2 weeks.
Yeah. The volume is still there for him, obviously. I just worry again about injury and his age. But that's about it for the games that we're going to discuss. We're going to get into the best bets in a second. But I just want to remember and remind everyone here, if you're watching the show live, guys, don't forget to smash that like button. It really helps us out, helps support the show. It lets YouTube and the algorithm know that, hey, you like the show. And then it'll also suggest us to other people. So if you like the content that we're making and you want to see more, please hit that like button. It really supports the show. Jack, let's get into your best bets. You have, I'm going to call it 1.5 best bets because one is not available right now, but let's get into the one that is available right now. So you like Allen Robinson?
Yeah, it's Allen Robinson under 17.5 yards on his longest reception.
Okay.
Robinson is another guy who's getting up there in age. In week 1, his average depth of target was 7.1. In week 2, it was 6.0. So he's getting more underneath targets, which doesn't really warrant itself to an 18-plus yard catch, especially when you're Robinson's age and not really a big yards after the catch threat. I think Pat Freiermuth will be more involved this week than he was last week. And Calvin Austin is also pushing Robinson for snaps, routes, and targets. So I think Robinson is going to get, a few targets, but I just question his ability to make plays down the field.
Yeah, and the under 17.5 here is like minus 115 consensus, but Pinnacle, best price in market, minus 113. What's the second half bet, let's call it, that you have here?
Yeah, the second one, I mean, it's really just kind of a martingale if we're being honest. But I took Matt Stafford under 4.5 rush yards last week, and it lost, even though it's hit at an extremely high rate in the past. Maybe Matthew Stafford turns into more of a dual threat this year and in his mid 30s, and I keep losing money. But I think this is more about the player than the matchup. So I don't think Stafford's rush yards line should be that impacted by the defense he's playing. And so I think that the Stafford rush under, if it pops again at 3.5 or 4.5, I'm going to be going right back to that.
All right. Sounds good. Keep your eyes on the sports book for that. Not listed right now as it's the Monday night game here. Jack, thank you so much for tuning in or for coming and joining us here today. I really appreciate it. It was fun to talk to you, and I will catch you later. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
All right. See ya. That was Jack Miller from Establish the Run, guys. We're almost on the show here. Just a reminder, if you like the content, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We appreciate all you guys. I see you smashing that like button. I appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell to be notified every time that we go live here. Up next, we have John Laghezza, good friend of mine, good friend of the show, host of Call the Pen on the Hammer Betting Network, NFL and MLB writer for The Athletic. John Laghezza, my man. How's it going, man?
What's going on? Twice in one day. Lucky me. Jay, I don't get it, man. I'm running hot as the sun on NFL props, and I'm 0-2 on the show. We absolutely have to turn around. I think the only props I've missed were here. I missed Rachaad White week 1. He went out and got it the second time. I missed Elijah Moore last week. He had like 9 or 10 targets, and we finished like a yard short. So come on, man. I'm ready to turn it around.
Yeah, the Elijah Moore stuff. I was watching that Monday night, trying to sweat for the show, and I'm like ripping my hair. We just talked about how bad Deshaun Watson's looked, and it's like, man, like you're feeding targets down Elijah Moore's mouth, and then just couldn't get it done for us. But it's okay. We bounce back on the show here today. Let's get into our first game here. We talk a lot behind the scenes here, but one of the games we were talking about here was the Chargers at Minnesota. Minnesota right now -1, -108 over at Pinnacle. Injuries to note for the Chargers here. Eckler is a DNP, trending towards being out. Eric Kendricks DNP, and then Joey Bosa also a DNP, but he was DNP this time last week and ended up playing, I believe. So him. Then also for the Vikings side, that offensive line is decimated. Garrett Bradbury limited. Christian Darrisaw limited. I mean, verbal memes never really work, but this game, it feels like it's the battle of mid. I don't know if you've seen that meme, but the two 0-2 teams face off this week, and like, man, they're both down on their luck. Like the O-line for the Vikings, like I just mentioned, completely decimated. Chargers D looks like legit bottom 5 D in the league. The biggest positive coming out of this game is that most likely one of these teams is going to get a win, unless there's a tie, which would be incredibly on brand for both of these teams. But which of these teams are you buying going forward? Or are you just buying neither of them?
Man, it's really tough. They're actually more like the Spider-Man GIF maybe than anything. Really, but right, explosive offenses. And that's where the mid thing kind of lost me when I saw it on Twitter. The offenses are both really good, right? Yeah. Charger offense, top 7 in points per game, yards per game, EPA per play, drive distance, first down per drive, and drive success rate. That's pretty much the entire, gauntlet of efficiency stats. The offense is working. They're rushing the ball well, 147 yards a game, just over 4.8 yards per rush. Those are really good. Minnesota offense, 371 yards a game, more than 6 yards a play. These are kind of like the benchmarks for excellence. 80% pass rate. See, that might be working against them. Averaging 337 yards a game, more than 8 yards per attempt. The offenses are both good. You nailed it, dude. The defenses nowadays, I don't know. You got to stop them somewhat. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a bit of this where I think maybe some of these teams have fallen in love with this. We all call it the too high, but they're not all too high. But you can kind of broad brush it with just kind of preventative, right, shell coverages. All right, there's a place for those, right? And there's a time and a place to try and stunt the verticality of a game. But there are teams relying on it way too much. And I think we kind of get some of that here. Like the Chargers defense is a good example. They're giving up 31.5 points a game, 438 yards, almost 7 yards a play, 42 yards per drive. Dead last in EPA per drop back, but more importantly, dead last in EPA in the zone. But they run it all the time. So you kind of get this sometimes where teams have like this strategy in their head. And regardless if it works or not, they just keep going at it. They're going to struggle if that's the case again. So one of the places I was looking is, I know you like him. I like Jordan Addison.
Yep.
On the Vikings, really kind of explosive player. He's got the pedigree. We've seen him produce, as far as efficiency goes. And we're watching the workload kind of tick up now. 66% route participation week 1, went up to 78% week 2. And I don't think it's long before he's kind of taken over what KJO, right?
Mm-hmm.
More than 2 yards per route run, 15 air yards per target, 27% of the team air yards. So I think the Chargers are going to show zone, and the Vikings are going to look to attack it. Check this out, this Addison stat. I brought it. So he's 7 for 133 and 2 on the season. This is Jordan Addison. All 7 catches against the zone. All 7. So all of Addison's production against the zone going up against a Charger defense that does nothing but run a very bad zone. So I expect to see some breakdowns, and I like the Addison yardage props in this one. I love the ladders, but we could just go for the standard. Let's keep it conservative. And, man, I don't have it on hand, Jay. I had it and I lost it. But I think it was in the low 40s or maybe even high 30s.
It's ticked up now since it's been posted. I think a lot of pro bettors out there are hammering this line in place. It's at 49.5 right now, actually. But at that same time, I mean, it's a lot, but I don't hate that too much here. Like you mentioned, Jordan Addison does well in the zone coverage. And it seems like, based off of what you mentioned here, Jordan Addison's been playing basically only 3 wide receiver sets for the Vikings. And if they're going to go up against a team that plays zone a lot, it seems like they like to match up their 3 wide receiver sets against zone coverage here. So if you're good with it, I'm going to lock it in. Right now, 49.5 minus 114 is the best price
I think so.
I can find in market.
This is another one of the spots for people that like to be a little bit more creative where, again, when you're not in love with the base price, there's always a good argument to add on a bit of the alt price. You know what I mean? And you know me, Jay. I'm never out there trying to suggest people over leverage or over risk. I like to take a little bit of the original risk and put it on the alt ladder, right? The next rung. And listen, I just hit him last night. We hit Kittle and we hit Debo. If you stopped at 47 yards or 52 yards, you kind of capped your potential. I got paid all the way up to 80 on Kittle, and I got paid all the way up to 100 on Debo. So just to give people, there's multiple ways to skin a cap, but right, let's just try and bag the W. I really still like Addison, even though it's moved up. I think it's going to continue to move up because the Vikings, even if they get ahead, you can't expect them to look to run the ball. The Vikings may have the worst run game in the league. I mean, I'm not even sure if I'm exaggerating that part. It is just beyond poor. So, I mean, I guess we'll find out. But I like Addison because he can get it at any time. And where I was going, if the Vikings get ahead, I still think they keep their foot on the gas because the Chargers are very dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. With both potent offenses. So, I mean, generally leaning towards, I believe it's the highest total on the board. So, I mean, 49.5 minus 114. We'll lock it in here.
Yeah.
So let's lock that in for a full unit here. I like how you touched on how bad their backfield has been. I mean, even though they brought in Cam Akers, it's funny because he is like currently the worst running back in rushing yards over expected. I think he has like minus 42 rushing yards over expected, which is horrible here. But let's flip on to the other side of the coin. We have Austin Eckler, who is DNP for this Chargers and probably going to be out. So there's always talk running backs don't matter. Do you think he's one of the few running backs that do matter? And how much do you think him being out is going to affect this Chargers team here?
I mean, I think Eckler matters because I think he's very good. Though I think the way he gets used and the popularity he gets comes from the prop market, the DFS market, and the fantasy market, where he's more valuable in those games and formats than I think he is in real life. You know, he's not really my style of running back between the tackles. But again, he's great with his hands. And he's great around the end zone. But I don't think it's going to matter because I think it's already baked into the price that I really don't think he's going to play. And it's kind of a shame. But I guess, it's yet to be seen. But if we have our star running back who's already been out, kind of tracking to be out and has the non-contact jersey on, Thursday he's not practicing. Oh, yeah. He's not practicing. Oh, he's just watching. So they were trying to brag about him watching from the sidelines. I'm not really buying that. He's not
buying that. Yeah. All right.
All
right.
I wanted to look at the other side. That's kind of what I was thinking is if we're looking at the Kelly props, they weren't listed. It would be interesting because the Minnesota rush defense has been pretty porous. They're allowing over 165 rush yards a game, more than 4.5 yards per carry, 55 success rate allowed and a 10% explosive rush. That's actually Kelly too. So he's got a lot of those same things. He's got the big explosive rush rate. That it's not posted because of what you're saying. I would imagine it's going to come in like the, what do you want to say, the high 50s, maybe low 60s?
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
This is the Kelly rush prop. And when that goes, if it is under like 65, I think you really got to smash it. Because Minnesota's given up chunk plays. They're going to be dropped back looking to cover all the Chargers' vertical weapons. And I think they're going to dare them to win on the ground.
Yeah, fair enough here. So keep an eye on those Josh Kelly props.
Yeah.
They'll probably get listed once Austin Eckler is ruled out here.
Correct.
Let's flip over to the next game we want to discuss here. Denver Broncos at the Miami Dolphins. -6.5. Miami Dolphins right now are the favorites at -105 over at Pinnacle. Injuries of note, not many for the Broncos. Frank Clark mainly. DNP trending towards being out. Dolphins side of things, Teron Armstead is limited with a slew of injuries. Jalen Phillips also limited. And then the big one here, Jalen Waddle, another DNP due to a concussion here. I mean, let's start with the Dolphins. Tua Truthers, they feel vindicated as he's currently the odds-on favorite to win the MVP award. What are your thoughts on Tua's play so far this season? And on top of that, and what are your thoughts of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle's play this season?
Well, Miami is phenomenal. I've been ranting and raving the entire offseason about how Miami has turned the game on its head. We already mentioned the too high, stunting vertical north and south. So the best way to combat that is to go east and west. And that's what the Dolphins are doing, using, elite world-class track stars to run east and west. They've even accelerated that by using Tyreek Hill in motion, right? So he's getting 3 or 4 steps, full speed, head start in motion, and then taking off into the secondary, creating switches. It's impossible. They're impossible to defend right now. Now, with Waddle missing, I'm going out on a limb, and I'm saying he's missing because it's even going to lead into my prop play. I think the books know Waddle's going to be out also, or these receiving props for Miami would not be out.
Yeah.
So, and I know I often talk to you about this, Jay, and I think your usage of the book, right? You often use the book to navigate opinions, to form foundations, and I think that's very smart. And I think this is another place. If we were really worried about Waddle, the Miami props would not be up.
Yeah.
So that was the non-contact jersey that I just looked up. Waddle's in the non-contact jersey. He's not going to play.
He's not playing.
They were saying early on he was going to practice. So that was like, oh, wow, maybe he's going to play. But he didn't. If you're not taking contact, it's not practicing. So Miami offense, number one, 463 yards a game, more than 7 yards a play, leading in EPA per play. I mean, it's just unbelievable. 9.5 yards per attempt. And if you're into the real nerdy stuff, Tua is also like top 5 in time to throw. So to be top 5 in time to throw and top 5 in air yards per attempt, like that combination of quickness and depth, I mean, this is like Brady-esque. Now, to that point, the reason I was not on Tua or coming in is I still worry about the durability. And I knew when he was up, on 2 feet, he was going to be awesome. But to that point, that's why I worry about the MVP. The MVP investment on Tua is a long-term investment into something I'm extremely worried about. I'd probably put my money on Matthew Stafford before Tua. Stafford looks like vintage Stafford. He's moving. He's like moving. I didn't know his legs still worked. And he's moving around and slinging it. And he's got, again, I never want to knock world-class athletes, but like these guys we're not thought of as above replacement level players, right? I don't like to say players are bad. They're all good. But he's kind of pulling 5th rounders and 7th rounders and undrafted guys that we all kind of wrote off and turning them into superstars on historic pieces. So I'd be looking at Stafford over Tua, but that's the future stuff. To be honest, Jay, the odds are long enough. You probably could get them both.
Yeah, that's a good point here. And let's get into you kind of teased your best bet here. So let's get into you have 2 more on the board. Let's talk about it from instead of going from the Dolphins perspective, you had one on the Broncos perspective here that I wanted you to get into. Let's just tell us a little bit more about this Broncos prop you have.
All right, we just do it quick. Again, the Miami defense is not great. Yep. They run that heavy zone, and they kind of dare you to run. So I think there's going to be some love for the Denver running game. But I was actually looking at Cortland Sutton. Even though, sometimes, Jay, the answer is not always in 2 games worth of statistics, looking back. Denver's 0-2, back up against the wall. They know, again, similar to what I said before, there almost is no game script that Denver decides to start, sitting on the ball. That's not going to happen. If Denver's up 14-0, 17-0, you would think they're still going to be throwing the ball because Miami can just score at will, and you can't get caught sitting on your laurels. So I think they're going to be pushing it with the pass. Again, I mentioned the heavy zone, and they allow a lot of completions underneath. So the Miami pass D, the totals are not crazy, but they have allowed more than 72% completions, and that's a function of the zone. Like they understand that. They know that, and they look to limit yak. So I'm looking at Cortland Sutton, 24% of the team target share, and 36% of the team air yards against the zone so far this year. His reception prop is at 3.5. I started like even money -105. That's the one I want to lock in.
Yeah,
he had
okay.
He had 4 catches in week 1. He had 5 catches in week 2. I mean, we're kind of below the bar, and the script is in place. I'm not sure if this is like a stat algorithm thing. But yeah, to me, the answer is looking forward and not backward. I don't know how Sutton almost doesn't get 4 grams if he finishes healthy.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe it was just the big plays for last week from Mims and Johnson over there. But yeah, when you sent that to me, I was like shocked. It's only at 3.5. That seems very, very, very
money.
low.
That could have been even minus 140.
Yeah, not heavy juice. So let's go to the other side of the ball. Your other best bet. You have a ladder here for us. Tell us about it.
Yeah, okay, cool. Last one. Denver defense. Bottom 5 in EPA per dropback, passer rating allowed, and completion rate. Last week versus Washington, who is not really very good on offense, let's be honest. The Washington tight ends, Bates, Turner, and Thomas, you're like, who? Combined for 789 and 1. Washington runs a very split, tight end room. That's the opposite in Miami. They only have 1 tight end. His name is Durham Smythe, okay, in case you didn't know that. He's played 98% of the snaps, 94% route participation. For a tight end, that is 100%. That's almost like 110%. It almost does not exist in this plane of reality, that kind of, workload. He has 10 targets year to date, caught 3 in the first game, caught 3 in the second game, 44 and 23 respectively. But without Waddle, I think the pathway's open for a yardage game here. I'm on the ladder. I think the base play was 27.
Yep.
So I started my ladder at 38 because again we crossed 38 in week 1. So I don't feel like we're jumping the shark here. So I got 38 yards at plus 159, 48 yards at plus 340, and 58 yards at plus 994 in case Mr. Smythe happens to sneak into the seam. Again, these yardage props and ladders are really advantageous in my opinion because it's very rare that you hit and just kind of clear the bar. I feel like more often than not, and in particular with the way that the math moves the payouts, right? Because again, if you're, remember everything, all this stuff is very much weighted. But even if you have 1/10 of your allotted risk on that play, on the plus 994 for Durham Smythe, to just stretch an extra 20 yards. It's almost like, Jay, if you believe in a player to get 40, it shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to get 60. Yep. And if they're going to offer you 10-1 to get that 60, I think you have to put a responsible piece of the risk on it.
Okay, so we do $100 full units here on the show.
Okay, that's great.
How do you want to split it up here unit-wise? Do you want to do like a half unit?
When I do a 3-step ladder on a full unit, I'd say this one, I'd say 0.7, 0.2, 0.1. So 70, 20, and 1.
So 0.7 on the 38 plus, 0.2 on the 48 plus,
correct.
And 0.1 on the 50.
The idea being, even if we just hit the first step, the entire venture is profitable, and we could, go about our business pretty happy. But if he continues, and again, this just happened last night. Lots of people hit Debo early, and they were capped minus 110 or minus 140, whatever it was.
Yep.
And, we're building and ended up getting a plus 700 on that 100th yard. So, man, and it was just, I'm really glad you brought that up because it's very important, the kind of methodology and how you place these bets. And that's always important to kind of do the math, people. So, Jay, I love working with you, dude.
I appreciate working with you too, John. And just so everyone knows, all these picks are tracked third party on BetStamp. You can find us at Forward Progress HQ if you just search FWD Progress HQ. You can find all these picks tracked over on BetStamp, and we're looking to have a big bounce back week here after Elijah Moore let us down last week. But that just about does it for today, John. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. We'll talk after the show. That was John Laghezza from The Athletic. Thanks, John.
Congratulations. You did a fantastic job, Jay. Awesome job. Really proud of you. I listened the whole way through, man. Enjoy the weekend, everyone.
I appreciate it, John. All right. That just about does it for us here on Forward Progress for the Friday edition. As a reminder, we're going live every Monday to Friday at 2 p.m. with an assortment of hosts and guests to talk about the football slate coming up this week. Sunday morning as well, Rob Pizzola again will be live for the pizza buffet at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern. So if you're looking for bets to sweat on Sunday, that is the place to be. He goes through the entire board live with you and picks out his favorite bets still remaining. Finally, last thing on the docket here is Forward Progress Sunday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, just before the night game. Rob and Clive will be going live for Forward Progress, and we take a look at the opening lines courtesy of Pinnacle and talk about all the movement that we see happening in the week. If you're looking to get some good CLV, that is the best place to be for that. So before we head out here, just one more reminder, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. And if you're listening on audio, just leave us a review. It helps us out tremendously, guys, and it's completely free. So once again, last thing, thank you to our sponsors over at Pinnacle, your trusted sportsbook for the last 25 years. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle, must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly and not available in the U.S. That's it for me, guys. Thank you so much to Matt Freedman, Jack Miller, and John Laghezza, as well as George Tsilfidis for letting me fill in today. And then finally, you, the audience, for tuning in the entire way through here, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great football weekend, and let's go cash some tickets. See you guys.